It was December 31st, 1976, at the Pittsburgh Civic Arena in Pennsylvania. The massive venue, known locally as the Igloo for its distinctive domed shape, had been packed beyond capacity with 32,000 screaming fans who had come to ring in the new year with the king of rock and roll. Outside, snow was falling steadily, blanketing the Steel City in a pristine white that seemed fitting for the biggest New Year's Eve celebration in Pittsburgh's history. Inside the heated arena, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation as Elvis prepared for his encore performance, unaware that disaster was about to strike in the most public and embarrassing way possible. What happened next would transform a potentially humiliating wardrobe malfunction into one of the most triumphant and talked-about moments of his entire career. The jumpsuit that would soon become the center of attention was one of Elvis's most elaborate and expensive stage costumes. Custom-made by Bill Belew, the renowned designer who had created many of Elvis's iconic outfits, this particular suit was a masterpiece of craftsmanship and theatrical design. It was made of white leather with intricate gold and silver beadwork that caught the stage lights like captured starlight, featuring an American eagle design across the chest that symbolized Elvis's patriotic spirit and his status as an American cultural icon. The suit had cost over $10,000 to create, an astronomical sum in 1976, and had taken 6 weeks to complete. Every bead, every stud, every piece of decorative trim had been hand-sewn by skilled artisans who understood that they were creating not just a costume, but a piece of rock and roll history. The jumpsuit was fitted perfectly to Elvis's frame, designed to move with him during his dynamic performances while maintaining the dramatic silhouette that had become his trademark. But elaborate costumes, no matter how expertly crafted, are subject to the stresses and strains of live performance. The combination of Elvis's energetic movement, the heat generated by stage lights, and the natural expansion and contraction of leather under varying temperatures created conditions that could challenge even the finest tailoring. The evening had been proceeding magnificently. Elvis had performed for over 2 hours, delivering song after song with the magnetic energy and vocal power that had made him a global phenomenon. The crowd had been responding with the kind of wild enthusiasm that made the arena feel like it was about to lift off from its foundations. As midnight approached, the excitement in the building was reaching fever pitch, with 32,000 people preparing to welcome 1977 in the company of their musical hero. Elvis had left the stage after his regular set to thunderous applause and demands for an encore that could be heard 3 blocks away. He had retreated backstage for a brief costume change and refreshment, preparing to return for the traditional New Year's Eve finale that would send the crowd home with memories to last a lifetime. When Elvis reappeared on stage for the encore, the crowd's response was deafening. He looked magnificent in the elaborate white jumpsuit, the beadwork catching the lights and creating an almost supernatural glow around his figure. The cape attached to the suit flowed behind him like royal regalia, adding to the theatrical majesty that had become synonymous with his live performances. He began the encore with one of his most physically demanding songs, one that required dramatic movements, deep knee bends, and the kind of athletic performance that had always been part of his appeal. The crowd was on their feet, singing along with voices that competed with the arena's sound system for sheer volume and enthusiasm. It was during a particularly energetic movement sequence that disaster struck. As Elvis dropped into one of his signature deep stances, extending his arms wide and leaning back in a pose that had thrilled audiences for years, the stress on the jumpsuit's intricate construction reached its breaking point. The sound of ripping fabric was audible even over the crowd noise and the band's music, a sharp, distinctive tearing sound that seemed to echo through the arena's sound system. The elaborate jumpsuit had split completely down the back seam, from the collar to below the waist, exposing Elvis's back and creating a wardrobe malfunction that would have ended most performers' careers in embarrassment. For a moment, Elvis froze as he felt the cool arena air against his exposed skin and realized what had happened. The crowd, initially confused by the sound and Elvis's sudden stillness, began to understand that something had gone wrong. A ripple of concern and uncertainty spread through the arena as 32,000 people watched their hero deal with what appeared to be a catastrophic costume failure. Most performers would have fled the stage in embarrassment, ending the show abruptly and leaving the audience with an awkward and disappointing conclusion to their New Year's Eve celebration. The logical response would have been to retreat backstage for a costume change or to cut the performance short rather than risk further humiliation. But Elvis Presley had built his career on turning unexpected moments into opportunities for deeper connection with his audiences, and his response to this crisis would prove once again why he was considered the greatest live performer of his generation. Instead of fleeing or showing embarrassment, Elvis slowly turned to face the audience, a mischievous grin spreading across his face as he processed what had just happened. He reached back to feel the extent of the damage, then looked out at the crowd with the kind of self-deprecating humor that had always endeared him to his fans. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said into his microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system, "it looks like this suit has just given y'all a New Year's Eve present you weren't expecting." The crowd's response was immediate and electric. Instead of embarrassment or disappointment, 32,000 people erupted in laughter and cheers, appreciating Elvis's ability to handle the crisis with grace and humor. The potential disaster had been transformed into a moment of shared humanity and entertainment, but Elvis wasn't finished. What he did next would turn the wardrobe malfunction into one of the most memorable and triumphant moments of his career. He carefully removed the damaged jumpsuit's top portion, revealing the simple black t-shirt he wore underneath for comfort and temperature control. Then, with theatrical flair that only Elvis could manage, he held the torn jumpsuit above his head like a trophy, presenting it to the crowd as if it were a battle-won prize. "You know what?" Elvis announced to the arena. "This suit cost more than most people's cars, but I'd rather be real with y'all than perfect in some fancy outfit that's falling apart." The crowd went absolutely wild. This wasn't just recovery from a technical problem. This was Elvis choosing authenticity over appearance, choosing connection with his audience over maintaining an artificial image. The response was so loud and sustained that the building seemed to shake with appreciation. Elvis then made a decision that demonstrated his understanding of what his audiences truly wanted from him. Instead of ending the performance or leaving to change clothes, he continued the encore in his simple black t-shirt, performing with even more energy and passion than he had shown while wearing the elaborate costume. The result was electric. Without the constraint of the tight, heavy jumpsuit, Elvis moved with a freedom and naturalness that reminded everyone why they had fallen in love with his performances in the first place. This was Elvis stripped down to his essence. No elaborate costumes, no theatrical artifice, just pure talent and authentic connection with his audience. The crowd responded to this unexpected intimacy with enthusiasm that surpassed anything they had shown during the earlier, more formally staged portions of the concert. People were crying, laughing, and cheering simultaneously as they witnessed their hero choosing vulnerability and authenticity over polished perfection. Elvis performed 3 additional songs in his t-shirt, each one more powerful and emotionally charged than anything he had delivered while wearing the expensive costume. The music seemed more immediate, more personal, as if the removal of the elaborate outfit had also removed barriers between performer and audience. As midnight approached, Elvis addressed the crowd one final time about the evening's unexpected turn of events. "You know, folks," he said, "sometimes the best moments happen when everything goes wrong. Sometimes you gotta let go of trying to look perfect and just focus on being real." He paused, looking out over the sea of faces that were illuminated by the arena's lights. "This torn-up jumpsuit taught me something tonight. It reminded me that what y'all really want isn't some guy in a fancy costume pretending to be something he's not. What you want is just music, just truth, just someone who's willing to be himself no matter what happens. When the clock struck midnight, 32,000 people welcomed 1977, with Elvis Presley leading them in a countdown that was followed by the most heartfelt and emotional rendition of a New Year's song ever captured on bootleg recording. The performance was raw, honest, and more powerful than anything that could have been planned or choreographed. After the show, Elvis kept the torn jumpsuit as a reminder of the night when a wardrobe malfunction became a lesson in authenticity. He would often tell the story in later interviews, describing it as one of the most important performances of his career because it reminded him that his connection with audiences was based on who he was as a person, not on what he wore or how perfectly he could execute a staged performance. The New Year's Eve concert became legendary among Elvis fans, known as the night the suit surrendered or the T-shirt triumph. Bootleg recordings of that evening are treasured not just for their musical content, but for the captured moment when 32,000 people learned that authenticity is more powerful than artifice, and that the best performers are those who can turn disasters into opportunities for deeper human connection. Years later, fans who were present that night would describe it as the most meaningful concert experience of their lives. They talked not about the elaborate staging or expensive costumes, but about the moment when Elvis chose to be vulnerable and real, showing them that true star power comes from genuine human connection rather than theatrical perfection. The story of the torn jumpsuit serves as a reminder that sometimes our greatest triumphs come from our most embarrassing moments, that authenticity resonates more deeply than perfection, and that audiences connect most powerfully with performers who are willing to be human rather than trying to be superhuman. Elvis Presley proved that night that his title as the King of Rock and Roll was based not on elaborate costumes or perfect performances, but on his ability to connect with people as a real, flawed, authentic human being who understood that music is ultimately about shared emotional experiences rather than polished presentations.